over to the other side of the studio, where I hope Carol Shanahan, OBE, is waiting for me. Yesterday, Carol, I had a 45-minute conversation with a real-life dragon. I described you as a real-life dragon to my family today, but you can be quite scary at times, you know.
When it's needed.
When it's needed, absolutely.
I described myself as the mother of dragons, which my kids thought was really good, but then pointed out that to be the mother of dragon, I had to be a dragon myself. So we're all in it together.
I guess you don't get to where you are without being a dragon at times, but a cuddly one. Do you remember Barney? I remember Barney as when I had young children. Barney was a bit of a dragon. Do you remember the children's toy?
I thought it was a dinosaur.
Oh, it's a dinosaur?
Yeah.
It's not a dragon?
No, you're dragons, actually. Come on.
See, well, let's move away from dragons before I get into all kinds of... No, don't need to ask any questions about Barney, dinosaurs or dragons. You have to be a bit of a dinosaur at times as well, but we won't go there. Let's leave... Please don't send any questions in about dinosaurs and dragons, because that will just be a nightmare. But we do want you to send in loads of questions for Carol as we share in conversation together. We've got a chunk of time just to chat. Mm-hmm. Carol. So let's begin by finding out the person behind the name. Mm-hmm. Carol Shanahan, OBE, is known. Your name is known across both the city of Stoke-on-Trent and wider across Staffordshire for lots of reasons. And we'll talk about synaptics, and we'll talk about Port Vale, and we'll talk about the Hub Foundation. But who is Carol Shanahan? Who are you?
Who am I? Well, I was born in Lincolnshire, and so I'm a yellow belly. That's what we're known as. And it was really significant in that my parents separated when I was 6. And in 1963 then, and that didn't really happen. So I was the only one in my class from a broken home, as they called it. And it took me years and years to realise that that wasn't the worst thing that happened in my life. It was probably the most significant, but also one of the best, because what I learned from that, this is when you become a product of your past and not a victim of it. Mm-hmm. And that took me decades to do. But eventually I sort of really understood a lot of what I do now really came from that period. So my dad lived in Lincolnshire and my mum lived in West Bromwich. So I'd spend half the time in Lincolnshire in the country with people teasing me because I was a townie, and then half the time in West Bromwich of people reckoning I was a country bumpkin. So, I never really fitted in place, which I still don't really, and I'm perfectly okay about that. I'm perfectly okay to be who I am wherever I am. And so it's... but it did give me challenges educationally, because we were moving from... There was no national curriculum. So you would move in from grammar schools in Lincolnshire to a comprehensive in West Brom, and I left with nothing. I mean, I left school with a really good skill in truancy. I was good at being a truant.
It says on my notes that you had 1 O-level when you left.
No. I had nothing when I left. No, some years later I fancied a lad who went to a night class near West Bromwich. So I went to the night class for English, went off the lad, so stopped going, and then was asked to go back and take the exam because the lecturer thought I would be able to do it.
And what was the exam in?
English O-level, I got a B.
B?
Yeah,
well
a B without going to any of the lectures, so I did really well. So I've got 1 O-level, which came later. But the work side really came when I was 17, and I had a friend who worked in a job agency, Brook Street Bureau, I think it was. And I remember sitting with her and saying, well, get me an interview. And she was just going through this Rolodex, and she was just going, no. It was going like this. And then she said this one, and I said, oh, that sounds good. Can I have an interview? And it was for a computer operator. And she said, Carol, no, it's over 18. It's for a man, because you could say in those days, 5 O-levels, 2 A-levels, experience in the computer industry, because it wasn't IT then, it was computer, and a driver. I said, so, well, you're 17, a woman, no O-levels or A-levels, no experience, and you can't drive. And I said, yeah, it's okay, get me an interview. Which she must have pulled some favours, but she did, and I got the job.
That's amazing.
But it was. And so I was the first female mainframe computer operator for this company called Hoskins Systems. And that really sort of set me off. But it was that belief that I could do that, you know, and being able to present myself that, yeah, I could. And I had to go and do it, which I then did. And I did that classic thing of outmanning the men.
Yeah.
So I drank more, carried more boxes of paper, you know, whatever I needed to do to outman them, till I realised that actually I don't need to do that. I can be who I am, because I do know what I'm doing. But it was that sort of fake it till you make it sort of time. And then that went through till I met Kevin when I was 21, working for a computer manufacturer, and he was in sales. And I was in tech support, so I was installing and writing, doing demonstrations and all this sort of training and things. And then, you know, sort of the rest history, really. I mean, I met
the Kevin and Carol partnership began.
Yeah.
And that led to synaptics.
Yeah.
Talk me through synaptics. How did that begin, and how did you start business? Where did you start business? Where did you invest? How many staff did you have? How did that grow?
Well, we began synaptics in 1992, just round the corner from, so we're in King Street, Newcastle at the moment.
Yep.
Just round the corner on the Brampton. And we rented a little room which had 3 desks in it, and that was it. And there was just Kevin and myself. We both worked through the IT industry throughout the 80s. And the 1980s were a very interesting time. It was the Maggie Thatcher time, and the world changed during the 80s, and it went very much in business from being where companies, large companies, would care about their staff. So my mum worked for GEC. There was a welfare department, a sports department, you know, a social club. They took us to the Panto every year, the kids, you know, with the selection box and the Kiora, but there was this whole feeling for large companies that looking after their staff was part of what they should do. During the 80s, that very much changed to profit, just profit. So you got rid of tea ladies, you got rid of the nice canteens, you got rid of the welfare and the trips and all this sort of thing. And it became a lot more about shareholders being a distance away from the actual operation of the company, and therefore from the people. So they became a resource and stop being a person. And what Kevin and I really wanted to do, because we're very opinionated on how it should be, still are, and that we wanted to see whether you could run a company that was people-centred, not money-centred. So, I mean, you know, don't get me wrong, we want to make profits. We need to make profits for the company to survive. But it's a lot more about our people and you know, what is the role, you know, of the company as far as supporting the person is concerned. So, you know, when you've just heard Alan speaking here, their company has exactly that same sort of philosophy, where even during COVID, we will still look after the staff as well as we possibly can. We will still have the parties, we will still send them the meal, and we will adapt to it, but the people will always stay in the centre. And that's what we did with synaptics, and that's what we're now doing with Port Vale. In anything that we do, we would always put people in the centre.
I've had the opportunity to share with you over a number of years and see the ethos of the business at synaptics. If you were asked directly, what is the ethos of being a kind of people-focused business? What does that practically mean?
I mean, it's interesting. It's really looking at what do people need. The first value of synaptics is caring. You know, and we did a lot of work on our values, and wherever we come from, it is about caring. And I talk about people having sticky out bits, that people aren't a homogenous sort of, you know, you're all the same. Yeah. So you can't have a policy that will just fit everybody. You just can't have that. Everybody is different. They all have their own uniqueness, and that uniqueness changes, you know, their circumstances change. So you might have, you know, particularly during COVID, it's how are you know, the individuals dealing with that, what is happening to their family around them. You know, you could have, you know, they might be really concerned about their kids, or yeah, it could be anything. And how do you put a system together that that really values them as people, and gives what they need, not necessarily what you want to give. You know, so I was talking to Natalie, who's head of HR at Synaptics yesterday. We were going through some of the policies of, you know, so you might have something like, I don't know. Oh, we were talking about a prayer room yesterday. So, you know, to me, I wouldn't have a prayer room. I would have a quiet space. And this is what we're creating, because it almost feels like, you know, if you have something that you name and label, that you're trying to tick a box. Whereas I was saying to Natalie, well, what are you trying to achieve? And she says, well, I'm trying to achieve a space where people can go and pray, or reflect, or, you know, cry, or whatever it is they need to do. And I said, well, so that's what we're looking to achieve, is a quiet space. And if a person wants to go and pray in there, that's fine. If they want to go and cry in there, that's fine. So it's whatever they need, and making sure that that's what we're providing for them.
Carol, just out of interest, how many staff does Synaptics currently have?
360.
360. And you moved from that, obviously you're no longer in that little room with 3 desks just around the corner. You moved to Burslem. Why the move to Burslem?
Well, we ended up with 350 staff at that point, in 3 sites in Newcastle. So we have the large one on the Brampton next door, but one to the New Vic, and in the Turia, and also we bought the police station in Water Street. I mean, you know, if business people on this call want to take a piece of advice from me, never buy a police station. Just don't do it. The walls are that big, you know, I mean, it's ridiculous.
There's nothing you can do with it.
No, I mean, and even when you go around and you look at, you think, oh, they're interesting Victorian cells, you know, they're no use, don't do it. But we had staff in all 3, and when you run a business in the way that we do, it's really important to have people together. That togetherness,
yes.
Together is a word that we use a lot. And it was hard to achieve that. So I asked Kate, who's my eldest daughter, who works with us, and also Claire, to go and find a building that we could all be in together. And my criteria was I wanted a nice, beautiful Victorian building with 450 parking spaces in Newcastle. I was quite snotty about Stoke. I used to call it Newcastle actually. You know, people say, "Oh, you're from Stoke?" No, Newcastle actually. You know, I've got over myself. And they came back, and I always tell the story that they came back one Thursday, and I remember it so well. And they both looked naughty, as they both can. And I said, "What have you done?" And they said, "We found the perfect office." And I said, "Hang on, if it's perfect, why do you look naughty?" And they said, "Well, it's in Burslem." And I spent 10 minutes ranting, Burslem? I don't want to go to Burslem. Why do I want to go to Burslem? And I didn't know Burslem. I knew nothing about Burslem, in truth. I just knew that trying to move 360 people across the D Road wasn't going to be an easy task. And so we went and had a look on the next Monday. We had a board meeting, and we went and looked round. So it's the old Co-op supermarket, the old Normid, next to Port Vale on Hamel Road. And it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect, just what we needed. And we actually put an offer in that day and bought it. But it was next door to Port Vale, and there'd been a bit of an argument about match days and could the club use the car park on match days. So I knew that I had to go and find out more about Port Vale. And so I've got a good friend, Sue, who's a Vale fan, and so she took me to a match, and I fell in love. I absolutely fell in love with being in the railway paddock with the Vale fans and watching this match, and it was just amazing. And I've been to virtually every match since.
It's clear watching you operate, both in the business and at Port Vale and in the community, that you have a real love and passion for the community that Synaptics is now in. Of course, we jump forward and you now own Port Vale. Was that a good business investment?
It wasn't a business investment because it was never meant, that was never the idea of it.
Okay, so why buy a football club?
Why buy a football club? Well, I think if you go back to me when I was young, and as I say, I mean, I didn't engage with education at all. Although the teachers knew that I was bright. So when I went to a school reunion when I was 40, and I saw the maths teacher, and we started synaptics, and I went in Kevin's car because it looked better than mine, you know, and all the rest of it. And he was saying, what have you done? And so I was telling him about synaptics, and he said, I always knew you'd do well. And I said, you didn't, you described it to the gutter. And he said, no, you were walking a path, and you were always going to fall one way or the other, whichever way you fell was going to be spectacular. But there was something about you, and I thought, no, she'll fall the right way. When I went to Burslem, I met so many people that were walking that same path as I walked at the time. I saw the pre-80s that I talked about, you know, of the industries that we worked with. Dalton was the same, Wedgwood, and you know, you talk about Stoke-on-Trent. Stoke-on-Trent's personality as a city came from its pits and its pots, and its industry. And when that industry left, the people remained, you know, the employees all remained there. So I wanted to really help the area and the community as they transition into their new, so what does Stoke-on-Trent become next? What is its next iteration of its personality? That's why I think the LEP is so important, because that helps to form what Stoke-on-Trent becomes, what the community becomes. But while you're transitioning through that, you have to be positive and you have to have hope. And I've always felt that football can provide that. And when I was younger, I'd lived in Lincoln. A failed attempt at college, but I'd lived in Lincoln for a while, and it was the time when Graham Taylor was there, and he took Lincoln City from the bottom of the fourth to the top of the third. And the energy within the city, the positivity, the hope was palpable. You know, you just felt it wherever you went. And so I said to Kevin, you know, if we really want to help Burslem and Tunstall and the north of Stoke to be successful and to be positive, we have got to go and make Port Vale successful, because that will then permeate out. And so that's why we did it. So we didn't do it as a business decision. It was a social decision. But was that a good one? Yeah, absolutely, it was a good one, because even in, you know, that first year that we were there, I gave prizes out at the Co-op Academy, and Nick, who was the head teacher then, was saying, and this was only a few months after we'd bought the club, that already they could feel the positivity. You know, people were talking about, you know, what's going on at the Vale, and you know, suddenly you could hold your head up high and say, yeah, you know, this is something really positive. So long answer to a short question.
No.
Yes.
And in the midst of all of that, of course, that community engagement, the business and community relationship, the Hub Foundation comes in. You served nearly 200,000 meals as Port Vale Foundation and the Hub Foundation together over these last months, particularly during COVID. So there's lots of kind of social enterprise as well in the midst of the story. There's a few questions coming in, Carol.
Okay, let's have them.
Firstly, there's an anonymous person that always inspired by Carol and loving her story, which is great.
Thank you.
But I wanted to go down to the one bit further down. It kind of says, how do you find the time to juggle a successful business and run a football team at the same time? But it isn't just that. It's running a business, it's running a football club, which is also a business because it's got a whole hospitality industry that goes alongside it, and it's running the Hub Foundation. So it's managing a whole load of things. It's managing, because of course you're also a mum with a family, so you're managing family, you're managing synaptics, you're managing Port Vale as a football club, you're managing the Port Vale entertainment industry, you're managing the Hub Foundation. How do you manage all of that? And this person is directly, how do you manage more than one business at a time?
My first piece of advice is to get the best PAEA that you possibly can. And Ben, who's mine, I literally cannot live my life. I mean, he had 3 days off last week and I missed 2 meetings. I cannot fly solo without him. And I'm quite cool that it's a dependency culture, that's fine. Yeah. I think that for me, I've always referred to it as like a fleet of ships, you know, that you're captain of the fleet, not of the individual ship. Yeah. And then they will be different and they will have different needs. You need the best team that you can on each of them to operationally lead it, and which is what I've got. So I've got an incredibly good set of directors and then beneath them the heads of department that run synaptics, and they, my job is to make sure that they are supported when they need it. I always call myself a Nanny McPhee. That if something's not quite right, or if something needs some help, when they want me, but when they need me but don't want me, I'm there, and they can't get rid of me. And then and we'll work together and we'll get it right. And then when they want me but don't need me, I'm off. And so I tend to go and spend time in areas where they need some support. So it's the odd plate spinning analogy, but there's always a plate that needs a spin.
And then another one that's come in from a tweet to us. How do you balance business needs with social responsibility?
That is a tough one, because it's been very useful for us to have in our fleet. So we have synaptics, Port Vale Foundation, which is the charitable side of the club, and then the Hub Foundation. So we can focus what we're doing in the two charities, and then the other two. So this is what we did in lockdown. We put all four together, but because you've got those charitable arms, you can, as long as you keep very focused on what they were set out to achieve, and that you are then supported them to do that. So it's making sure that you don't overburden, sort of synaptics. Synaptics is there, we detect fraud and we offer services to, financial companies and insurance companies and the government. But at the same time, people will do charitable work, social work within that, but that is not the function of that organisation. And it's not the function of Port Vale. The function of Port Vale is to entertain, score goals, win games.
Hopefully score goals.
Yeah, and offer hospitality. And so what we've done during lockdown is we've been able to take the different areas and say, right, anything that's to do with hospitality from synaptics moves over to Port Vale, because that's its expertise. Synaptics is IT, so it offers now IT support to Port Vale. The social side of it comes from Port Vale Foundation and Hub Foundation, and they're both very clear what they're there to do, and the other two organisations support them as much as they can. So it's really been focused, I think, on what you're doing, and it is. So Adam Yates and the team that run Hub Foundation, they are all about social responsibility, as is Tom Sheraton, the Port Vale Foundation. They are too, and then we support them to do that.
That's great. Question come in for you, Carol, from John. He says, what efforts are you making to try and source products and services from local suppliers?
Oh, I'm huge on that. I think that it's one of the first things we did when we took over the club was went and built, because the relationships with local suppliers wasn't good, and so we went and Freshview was one of the first ones I went to for all our fruit and veg, and we were able to then support them during lockdown when suddenly all of their business went, because all of the bars and restaurants and hotels that they supply went. We were able to really support them on bringing in local business for them. So it is partnership, and everything that we can, we look to do locally. And there's so much that you can do locally when you really try.
Another question come in. I was going to pick up on this myself. Every time we turn the TV on at the moment, or the radio on, it's either your face or your voice. We're here. BBC News the other morning. We turn on our pyjamas and there's Carol. This question comes in and says, as a PR person, I'm interested to know if you've seen any benefit from raising Port Vale Football Club's PR profile nationally. Yes,
because I believe we have. Because I think football has a platform, not only for the football industry, but wider. I mean, you've seen it with Marcus Rashford, and that he's been able to raise the profile of child poverty. And it's using that, there's something about football clubs that enables, if it was just synaptics, then going on to Radio 4 or wherever I go on to, they would have to start to do a lot of explaining on who synaptics was and why it would have any relevance. For some reason, football clubs don't have that, but so as soon as they can say, right, well, she's the chair of Port Vale Football Club, then you've got an audience. And so to be able to, because I don't just speak about football, I speak a lot about child poverty and food and activities in the holiday periods, and so I try and use it for more than just football and business.
Just a couple of things before we draw conversation to a close. I just want to clear up the truth of a story that I heard. Is this true or not true? When you kind of voted to bring League Two to a close, because you were one of the key people that had to make a decision around saying we're going to end the season, it says you were shaking as you put up a vote, because actually that was about a wider decision. The best thing for the club would have been to have carried on season 2. We were a point off the playoffs, I think, at that point. Is that a true story? Were you really shaking at that point?
Yeah, no, I was absolutely shaking, because Colin Garlick and I went onto the call. It was a Zoom or Teams call, and we went on with the intention of arguing the case that we should be able to carry on, because we were 8th the week before. We had been in the playoff position, and listening to my colleagues, so the owners or executives of the other football clubs, I could see that if you were 8th, it would make a big difference like we were. If you were 12th or 15th, where you had nothing to win or lose, but you were going to have to spend an awful lot of money, and you'd have to take your players out to furlough and everything, but you couldn't win anything, I couldn't ask them to do that. And so there was this dawning realisation as the call went on that, hang on, this isn't going to work, this has to stop. But it was in my mind, I've got to tell John Askey, our manager, I've got to tell our fans, I've got to tell my board that I've actually voted to stop, and I've got to be part of that. And I've got to put the interests of Port Vale second and the interests of football first. And so that's what I did. Then the hardest thing I had to do was phone John Askey, which I did straight away, and just said, I've just voted to stop the season. And he still speaks to me, so that's good.
and final question, Carol. Of course, Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire today move into Tier 3 with COVID restrictions. That's a challenge for us. With many businesses really struggling, what are your words of advice? So this is your final kind of comment. What are your words of advice to businesses in these tough times?
On the first day that football was suspended and we knew that it was going to go into lockdown, I said to my leadership team across all 4 organisations, how do you want history to write us? What do you want, when you're talking in a dinner party in a few years' time, what did you do during lockdown? What did you do during COVID? Because that will be the conversation. What do you want to say? Do you want to say, well, we perfected banana bread, which is fine, the world needs banana bread, or do you want to say that actually we used that time and we made a difference? And they, without hesitation or exception, all said, yes, we want to use this time. And I would say use this time, because adapt to it, learn from it, grow from it, and view it as a gift. Really, it's hard. I mean, I'm not minimising it. It's hard, but for me, there's a lot that we can learn, and it's given us an opportunity to become something that we otherwise wouldn't have become in a very positive way.
Thanks, Carol. Thank you so much for sharing time with us. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for inspiring us. Carol Shanahan, OBE, thank you so much.
Thank you.